My dudes, we are back with the fourth podcast for Twilight Monk. This is also, I'm calling it Art and Podcast because I also include loads of art throughout the whole process and the whole conversation of the video. It's something that just makes it more interesting, I think. So I've been trying to figure out the best way to do these podcasts. Mostly it's me talking with people on the development team or people who've worked on Twilight Monk with me. In this week's episode, and yes, it's a weekly podcast every Thursday. In this week's episode, I'm sitting down with Nate Buckley. He's the programmer on Twilight Monk. And we're going to talk about everything from how he got into programming and, to things, features in the game that were particularly of interest, to develop. And it's a little bit of behind the scenes, a little inside baseball on the process of developing this game. And I actually found out a lot of things about Nate that I didn't know. A good episode, I think. And I hope you enjoy the artwork. Stay tuned at the very end for the newest trailer. Biggest news, by the way, is that the game is announced to be released on March 27th. There was a little kerfluffle earlier in the month where it was on the Switch store for like a couple of days, but the release date got mixed up, and anyway, it's all been confusing. But now I can say with absolute certainty and officiality, it's March 27th. It'll be on the Nintendo eShop, and it'll also be on Steam for PC. And so, without any delay, let's jump into the podcast with Nate Buckley. Hello and welcome to the Twilight Monk podcast. This is episode 4. Today I have with me Nate Buckley. And Nate, you are the lead programmer on the Twilight Monk game.
Yes.
And you've been with us you didn't start out on the project.
No, I didn't. I think I came in a year after you'd been going, maybe a bit longer.
Was it a full year? Were we that deep into development?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Wow.
And then I joined, and then I think it's nearly 2 years now that I've been with you guys. Or at least a year and 10 months.
Yeah, right. Because we've had about like 6 months of kind of bug fixing and final polish that we didn't initially plan for. The game was originally scheduled to just be 2 years of development, but we got super ambitious and we want to make sure that it's nice and tidy when we ship it. And that's a lot of what you've been doing lately.
Yeah, definitely. I've been lots of bug fixing, lots of polish. I'm currently working on the controller remapping. That was something that we want to get in prior to release if we can.
Yeah.
So I'm currently working on that because that was one of the things that we wanted to get in. We weren't sure if we'd be able to get in, but when the game went through Next Fest, that was something that a lot of people were asking for. So,
specifically on keyboard controls. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is a tough one, and I get it. Technically, Steam lets players if you use the Steam dashboard, you can customize your controls for any game, but it is always nice if there's just that extra effort from the developers. I think some people, when they did their playtest, they thought it was a real simple thing to add, and I don't think it's a simple thing to add. It's a very complicated thing to add.
Yeah, so it depends. It can be a simple thing to add. In previous projects, I've always added that in towards the start, because then you're already building up, from a good base. So I wasn't the original programmer, so some of the ways that certain things have been implemented are kind of like hard coded with the input rather than using what Unreal provides. Mm-hmm. So the hardest parts are more the making sure not to break anything because we're very close to launching. Yeah. So it's all being implemented, but due to the way some things were built, I just need to be a bit careful when I'm pulling things apart.
Oh yeah, when you get this close, it's like if you move one piece, it could mess up 5 other pieces that were depending on the positioning of that one piece, right?
Yes, definitely. So basically every change I kind of make is I end up doing a lot of testing around it and roping in Ant as well to help me because we're on the same time zone because both myself and Ant are from the UK.
Yeah.
So we end up working together quite a lot.
Yeah, we just did that. Matt just put in a bunch of sound files for NPCs and monsters, and it bumped up the file sizes, and it's hogging a little bit of memory. So I've been doing all day yesterday and today, just playing through the whole game again on Switch.
Yes.
So this is not your first game that you've worked on?
No, so I've not been in. So I started in the industry rather later on in my life, but I've worked on probably about 4 or 5 games now. So I got into the industry when I was 34, and I started working on an indie game It was originally called Robot Champions, and then it changed to Smash Punks. And then the company I was working for, Prospect Games, ended up doing a bit of co-dev stuff. So I kind of ended up doing co-dev. I worked on Beyond the Steel Sky as a scripter/designer. That's a point-and-click game. It's originally, when I was young, one of my favorite games was Beneath the Steel Sky. So it was very nice to kind of have my first credited game as working with Revolution's studio.
That's cool.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I did a bit more co-dev with Prospect and Flex on Sea of Thieves. I did some AI behavior stuff, which I really enjoyed, and it was a nice opportunity to see how the big boys do things, and they do it very well. With that all set up, Rare and Flex are fantastic engineers and fantastic designers as well. So it was I was only doing a contract, I think it was 7-ish months, and within that 7 months I learned so much as well. But I started Creature Cauldron, and we made a game called Spirit Hunters Infinite Horde. And then
very fun game.
Yeah, thank you. And then I've worked on lots of little things, and then I did a contract. I started another contract, and then started a contract with yourselves.
But you were so before you had been programming in games. Were you in programming, or were you in a totally different industry?
So I started being an actor, or trying to be an actor. And
what?
I can't act. Yeah.
Are you serious? I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. So my youth was spent going to auditions and making a film myself. Yeah.
Were you in anything? Were you in some commercials I can look up or anything?
So when I was really little, I was nearly the Milky Bar Kid, but I never got in.
Did you say the Milky Back Kid? What did you say?
The Milky Bar Kid. Milky Bar Kid. The Milky Bar Kid is strong and tough.
I don't know what you're saying. No, I don't know what the Milky Bar is.
It's a chocolate bar in the UK, I guess. And on the kind of the mascot, I don't know if it's still around now, but it was like a young boy with blonde hair, blue eyes, and
yeah.
So,
are you saying you're the Milky Bar boy?
I was nearly the Milky Bar Kid.
You were nearly the Milky Bar Kid.
Nearly the Milky Bar,
but
that was kind of my claim to fame there.
Wow.
And I guess I was an extra a few times because I went through auditioning for goth roles, very very niche. But I had like long black hair and I fit that role, I guess. So a lot of my agency at the time was like sending me to lots of goth kind of roles.
Look, man, here's the thing. I know it's a podcast and it has to be entertaining, but you don't have to make shit up. This is too crazy. Are you serious? All of this is real. You're saying all this is everything you just told me is not something you made up last night.
No, this is real. So I did that, and then I kind of packed it all in because I had the agency that I was with messed up the audition and sent me to an audition. I thought it was for like a rocker, like an alternative, like rocker type character. So I dressed up all in kind of like Cradle of Filth gear and wearing some edgy t-shirts that weren't really suitable for where I ended up, which was for a Christmas hamper advert with like loads of kids running around dressed as chimney sweeps. So I had to kind of cover up my t-shirt because it's quite edgy. I don't know what to say there.
Is your club gear basically? You're in a kids commercial, but it's you're wearing club gear. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so when I walked into the room to audition, they were taken back because I was completely dressed wrong. But then I had to jump around pretending to be a chimney sweep. From Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
So that was like inside I was dying, but but I was taught to kind of like always put 100% in.
Yeah.
So they're all laughing, and I'm just prancing around singing.
You gotta sell it, man, no matter what the situation, right?
I'm right, yeah. So I did my best, but at that moment I went, "This isn't for me," and then I thought, "Oh well, I'll just go back to computers."
Wow. Fascinating. That's the best origin story I've heard so far. Wow, so you really cleaned up your act, you'd say.
Internally, I'm still a goth.
I gotcha.
Outwardly, I'm a middle-aged man. Wouldn't be able to pull that off.
So you must really love Twilight Monk because it gets dark, right?
Oh yeah. So, but from that, I, did computers. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was kind of like I was all over the place when I was younger, and did a bit of caring and did the odd jobs. And then eventually, I went back to university as a mature student and kind of got In the UK, you can do courses at uni called sandwich courses, where it's 2 years study, 1 year work placement, and then you do your final year. So I did a job from that third year, and then I ended up carrying on working there for them afterwards. And that was in doing embedded programming. So I was programming like hardware and gambling machines and stuff. It was all right. I learned a lot of low level stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah. So you didn't really start out programming in games. It was more. Well, you said some casino stuff, right?
Some casino stuff. It was
Right.
kind of like, yeah. And while I was doing that, because I needed money at that point, because I was a mature student, I was broke. So I was just like, I'll just take anything. And the game industry was always kind of just alert. I couldn't get my foot in the door. So what I did was basically chipped away at game jams and all this stuff in my extra time. And I started networking and going out meeting people in the games industry and stuff. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door eventually. And then, yeah, just kind of worked really hard to keep always learning.
You know what? This now things make a lot more sense, and I get it. And it's maybe all of those detours and other things that you were doing were really essential for you to understand working with creative people, like working with more. Because you're like a normal dude, and that's part of what makes you so great to work with, from my experience. Because, and this isn't, I don't want to like say, oh, all programmers are a certain way or share any personality. Just I had a lot of experiences working with programmers that were very. They would get frustrated with my creative, like what I was trying to do creatively, and yet. And I get it, because I've also done a little bit of programming, and it can be very frustrating when you're dealing with somebody who's like changing their mind and they don't understand how much of a big ask that is to make some changes, or, but from the creative side, it's like you have to be so unburdened by the technical limitations of things and just think what would be the coolest thing for the player to experience here,
Yeah.
And I think what's really unique about working with you is like, you don't shut anything off. You're like, well, let's see, how do we solve that? And then we just go in and we try to like pick it apart and break it down into simpler terms, and we find a way to meet in the middle. And that's just the most awesome kind of, I think you're one of the best programmers I've ever worked with because of this.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I think for me, so I love working with creative people. I think, I don't know if it's because was hanging around with loads of actor types and artists, because I ended up, a friend went to a very prestigious university in London, full of very well-off acting types. I'm from a working class background, so it was a whole new world to me when I did a stint in London. But there was something really kind of alluring about the whole creative artists, hanging around with artist types, and there's a strange kind of creative buzz because they're generally like unburdened, as you said, with reality of like what can be done, and they just go with it, and they express themselves, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think that bit of experience of that world and wanting to kind of be part of a creative outlet, because I feel I've always been a creative person. I just can't draw and things like that, but I think I can do that by creating worlds digitally, and when I work with good designers, good creative leads, you can it's exciting not to turn everything down, but to be solution based. Let's try and make those dreams a real thing, because that's cool. You come up with all the cool stuff, and let's try and make it a reality. There are always technical limitations, either team size or skill size. I'm not the smartest person in the world, I'm not the best programmer, but I like to find ways to kind of work around limitations, and rather than being a no, that's not possible, or being a wall. I don't want to be a hurdle.
Yeah, and I have worked with programmers that were like that, and it can be so, as a creative, and many people who listen to my podcast are people who tune into my YouTube channel are artists, right? So they're going to relate to this. But like, if somebody's always telling you can't do that, it's that's going to go way over budget, or that's going to take an extra 4 months to do, or something. If you have too many of those things, it can just completely just suck the life out of your excitement for the project. And so that's one of the things I love working with you is, and I think everybody on the team shares this kind of desire to, even if it means simplifying what we're doing, we find a way to get the essence of what made that idea cool and get it actually into the game. One thing that I don't want to say it's a regret, but like I hope that in the future, we can get you doing more of things like even doing some level design or coming up with some dungeon ideas, or even, and you always throw in interesting concepts and ideas. And I think that some of those things did shape different elements of the game that we have made up to this point. But I'd like to unleash that. I'd like to get Nate unleashed, basically.
Thank you. I think it's just part and parcel of the kind of situation. So I came in with already an established game and certain deadlines. And yes, of course, it would have been nice to unleash me, so to speak.
Yeah.
But there's the reality side of, well, let me just focus on my skills now to help everybody else unleash themselves with their various roles and, move forward that way. Yeah. Twilight Monk 2, whatever project's next.
Well, hey, don't open that can of worms. There's no official confirmation to clarify. Nothing official has been announced. But yeah, I definitely want to make another game with you. So
whatever project,
whatever it might be.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to, there'll be more time then, and we can build things in a way where it's not all, either implementing stuff or fixing things.
Yeah, we really built this game very quickly. In fact, I've never made a game so fast.
Yeah.
But that is also a testament to, our ability, I think, as a team to communicate well and count on each other, trust in each other. And I would say another superpower that you have is when faced with impossible or frustrating or even stressful situations, like where the publisher is like, hey, we need all these bugs implemented or fixed before tomorrow or whatever, you just buckle down and you just get that thing done. And we have a lot of fun in our meetings, I think. And, game development just in general can be so stressful. And so it's important that everybody on the team keeps a cool head and can handle the stress. That's a skill in and of itself, like a muscle you have to exercise.
Yeah, I think, I've always found the communication between, yourself, Matt, and Amy, Nick when he was on, all really positive and always in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Even if, like you said, there's been moments where it's been kind of like really full on, and it's just about that communication and working as a team and being able to kind of rely on one another. I think we've all always had each other's backs, and when someone's been struggling, someone else will jump in to kind of say, how can I help to make it a little bit easier you can focus that bit, and that's always been helpful as well. So obviously I work a lot with Ant because we're the kind of same time zone, and he's always offering to, well, I'll test that for you, or I'll input that data, because sometimes the game is actually a lot of entrance, filling in data tables and stuff, and Ant's always said there's no point the programmer doing that, or the artist, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And that's always been helpful as well, just kind of speed things along. So so communication's always been good.
That is kind of a weird thing about this development team, is that, and it's kind of unique to this era of time, because like I'm in California, Matt's in the middle of the United States. You and Ant and Amy are all over in the UK in the same time zone, and then our publisher's in Japan. So literally there is not an hour of any day that somebody is not working on Twilight Monk.
I think it kind of adds a bit of interest as well, because like culturally, there's a lot of different cultures kind of all throwing their own bit into the game as well.
Oh yeah, with the blokes, you and you and Ant gave me so many interesting bits of dialogue and colloquialisms and just British phrases and things that kind of worked their way a little bit into the script. It's kind of an old-timey, like a turn of the century kind of industrial age England, or London, the way that everybody talks, kind of Cockney-eyed, and so I get a little bit of a real-time correction as well from you guys on my accenting of characters and whatnot. But I love the multiculturalism, because also like Amy is she's Australian. Well, she's New Zealand. She's from New Zealand, but she grew up she spent many years in Australia, and now she lives in the UK. So,
and she's always trying to get us to say that New Zealand or Australian candy or sweets are better.
But nothing tops American Whoppers. Come on, you can't beat.
I've never had an American Whopper, so I'll have to try that out one day.
Malt chocolate. Yeah. Anyway.
Nice.
Yeah. So I know you're also. One thing I wanted to ask you about while we're on the topic of working with the team, was there anything in this game, because a lot of, and we haven't been too specific, but yet up to this point. So I wanted to kind of hone in a little bit more on what exactly your role is. Like what kind of things have you been doing on the Twilight Monk game? And is there any particular thing where you were particularly proud of?
So I came in originally just to help out because I was looking for a part-time kind of programming gig, and it was like, oh, we need a programmer. I think Ant mentioned me, so I got on that way. So I kind of came out, started helping out. Obviously, the code base was already established, so I kind of just jumped in and started making systems. And then over time, sort of my responsibilities grew. But most of the time, I kind of was like adding systems in, and as I moved through the various already existing code base, tidying it up little by little as I moved through it. But I think, gosh, there's so much that I've kind of touched or done. It's hard to say which bit was my favorite. I kind of enjoy going through all the new designs, so implementing like the talisman system or the mini games, that they were fun as well. Gosh, there is a lot of stuff. It's because I've touched so much stuff. It's hard to say particularly.
Yeah.
I did always.
Oh, go on.
No, I did kind of enjoy just working on all of it, to be honest, just because I get the opportunity to kind of jump around lots of different systems rather than being, focused on a single area, which I kind of enjoy anyway. It's one of the reasons why I probably wouldn't suit working in a very specialized role, because I think I just get too kind of uncomfortable just focusing on one area. Whereas at least a project like this, I'm allowed to jump all over the place.
There are a lot of things that people might not realize require specialization or, a dedicated person who's very knowledgeable of programming or of that specific engine. Just as a simple example, when the character transitions from one screen to the next, even just that simple thing from an artist perspective, it seems so simple. You just, when you go from one room, you can describe it. But the actual subtleties of that, it took Anthony working directly with you to like isolate, let's say we have him when the player reaches the edge of the screen, there's like an auto walk as he goes off screen, and then an auto walk into the next room as he's entering into the new zone. And that needs to feel fluid. It needs to feel natural. And then you run into all these what if statements, such as like, well, what if the player is in a mode that they're moving fast? And I'm trying to be vague as to not give away some of the abilities that the player gets.
Yeah, I was thinking like, how can I word stuff?
Yeah.
So lots of things, especially because the code was already there for it. And what I found is especially the deadlines, I couldn't rewrite certain things, so I had to work around how it was set up. So there's a kind of that element of it as well, where it's okay, here's how it's built, how can I make it a little bit nicer, but how can I also move forward with the task at hand to move forward. So that's in itself is kind of like it's not just a programming issue, it's almost like, how do I tackle this problem, which is always kind of fun in a way of taking apart how something works and improving it a little bit, and also as I said, moving forward with your own tasks there, because you can't suddenly stop. I'm sorry, I can't do these tasks, I've got to rewrite this entire system. You just got to go, okay, written like this, let's move forward the best way possible. And that's always interesting and fun.
You've pinpointed one of the things that is, again, one of the things that I love working with you because of what you just said. So I've worked with many programmers that will say, no, I have to rewrite the whole system. I have to rewrite the whole room transition system. But you don't do that. You just go, okay, well, what do I got? And how do I get the results that they're looking for without completely redoing this whole thing? And I've worked with programmers that were like, okay, we have to rewrite this sequence. We have to rewrite I have to start from the ground up. And they, to this day, like some of the programmers I had worked with, they still haven't shipped their first game.
Yeah, it's very kind of you always want to put out the best work you can and architect things as perfectly as possible. With contracting and coming into projects that are already established, you kind of have to learn that not everything's going to be perfect, but let's make it work with what we got and tidy it up a little bit as you move along, because you don't have to rewrite the entire thing. You can make it a little bit tidier each time you visit it, which kind of like over time might do that task anyway. So it's just about learning that. Obviously, if I was part of the project at pre-prod, one would hope that I'd build things in a certain way which we wouldn't need to rewrite. Which is everything. You always hit a point in any kind of system where it's like, oh, I didn't think of this edge case, that edge case. So you still always have to come at it. But obviously, that's just the nature of the beast, and there's fun to be found in kind of the chaos.
Well, it's funny because also with programmers, they get attached to the way things had been set up before. And like, just as a brief aside, when I was working on Diablo 3, we were basically still just using the engine from Diablo 2 because the lead programmer had built a lot of that and he didn't want to start over. He didn't want to, completely rebuild it from scratch. But that was a 2D engine. And so we had to accommodate there was so much duct tape and gum holding things together. And and of course, as we mentioned earlier in the beginning of this conversation, you move one piece and that can like throw off the threads of a million other pieces. And before you know it, you got piles and piles of bugs and it's all interconnected. And certainly you're right. If you could set things up from the get-go, it'd be preferable. But then again, sometimes, from my perspective, and again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, it seems like it's almost like it'll never be perfect because you're also always developing and growing. And so you might have even thought, well, there was a better way I could have done that, a year in.
Yeah.
And
100%.
So it's infinite. And, artists are like this too. It's like, there's so many scenes in this game where I'm like, oh, I wish I could rewrite that particular sequence, or I wish I could have given the player this other ability earlier in the game. We gave a lot of thought to the decisions we made, but once you look at the context of the whole thing and you see how people are, interacting with it, and you learn, you grow. And if you weren't growing, you'd be stagnant. So it's good that we're always growing. And you did acting for a while, so you're probably aware of like methods of improv too, right? Where you just kind of go with whatever's established, much like yourself in your goth clubbing gear when you show up at an interview or a tryout and you're in the completely wrong gear. You still got to sell it. You still got to give it your absolute best with what you've got right in front of you. And that is game development at all times.
Yeah. Yeah, it is 100% all the time. Just do your best with what you got,
and accept that it'll never be perfect. But then you're still learning. So the next game you work on is hopefully you're gonna bring over all the knowledge and experience of everything that you acquired from those challenges you faced. That's the value of experience. So many people disregard experience. Is so valuable for that.
And there's value as well in being. I don't know how to word this. So if there's something that you really don't like the way it's implemented and it causes you a lot of pain, you're going to be very aware of, I'm not going to build it that way next time, or I'm never going to build it like that. And there's value and there's learning in things that really you don't like or have been built in a certain way, because those are, to be fair, those are probably the best lessons that you're going to take with you to the next project. It's like, well, I'm definitely not doing that again, type thing. So.
Yeah. No, I feel that way about. This was the first time that I've run an art house for many years, so I'm no stranger to sort of managing, art tasks and managing people who are all kind of working on their own parts of a complex thing that then gets assembled. But this particular project was the first time that I had to plan out milestones, plan out budgets, plan out the script, plan out all these moving parts that have to work together. And there were so many things that were exactly like what you just said, where I learned so much about how I don't want to assemble a game in the future because of the stresses that it put me through that were unnecessary. I could have just had so many things solved before I dove into it. But then before you dive into something, you don't know what the problems are going to be when you get there. And so you can't really strategically like plot out every line of your script or your sequence of events, because you don't know what it's really going to be like with the team you've got, with actually implementing those features into the game, and like, how much time it's going to take to do, what the skill set of everybody on your team is. You learn that throughout the process of development, which is, again, one of the great benefits of working with the same team on multiple projects. Each time you get to take all this knowledge and experience and synchronicity that you build.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I've been working with Ant for a while on different projects, and so it's like that's very helpful because I know how to communicate with him very well. I know his strengths and weaknesses. I know when I can kind of like lean in to help with those weaknesses, and I know when I can trust him with his strengths to kind of like not worry about stuff.
Yeah.
So, as you grow with a team, especially if you work on multiple projects together, it's a beautiful thing. Like, so I work on a little horror game in my spare time, but for that I'm currently doing the writing and figuring out how to do narrative design and narrative writing, and that's a completely foreign skill to me, but I'm enjoying it a lot. But initially, I was spending so much time just trying to tackle it one way and just never making any progress until I decided to kind of go, well, how if I was programming this, how would I deal with it? And I realized that I'd break it down into little tasks and I just move forward. And so I started just doing that, and it's helped a lot by bringing that mindset to a different skill.
And you really do have to kind of change hats. You're switching your brain from a producer or creative brain into your doer brain, the actual implementation brain. And if you let the doer brain talk to the creative brain, he's going to talk him out of a bunch of things, because it's like, wait a minute, how the hell are you going to do a cutscene like that? Do you even know the sequencer system or, the tools well enough to get that? Or what's the cost, in terms of time or budget, or, what's the limitation of your skill set as well? And so the creative brain has to be completely almost untethered from that. And then you sort of, you pass this task list to your doer brain, and then it's go time. And that, I found that's the easiest way for me to think of it.
It's like 2Us type of thing. It's like you have to like completely be two different people almost.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, with game dev, and that's why I always say it's like it really is where science and magic really meet. It's art, but it is very structured. It does require a very analytical, technical mind to accomplish. But the artist brain or the creative brain has to be completely untethered from those things. And it is a battle.
Yeah.
And this goes back to where, I never really butt heads with you. I don't think we've butted heads that I know of. You might curse my name when when I send you like a new localization file or something. I'm sure that happens. But it's like
it wasn't a curse of your name. It was just a tut and the shake of the head.
Yeah, well, it's not me. That wasn't me. Okay, it wasn't my fault. It just happens. It's part of having so many moving parts. It's crazy that we tried to make a game with 11 or 12 different languages at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it is crazy.
While figuring out the engine, by the way, which is like none of us have ever made a game like this with Unreal Engine. So yeah.
No, yeah, that's all. Yeah, it's crazy.
By the seat of our pants, I'd say. So you work with Creature Cauldron on your last game, Spirit Hunters, with where you were the only programmer on that, right? And that's done entirely in Unity Engine. And I'm going to spark a little bit of a engine wars debate here. Which is better, Unity Engine or Unreal Engine?
Ooh,
from your perspective.
I like them both. So I don't know if this makes me a weird person, because every programmer that I meet is very passionate about one engine or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I have literally no strong feelings. Like, I find it very hard to kind of passionately. I like them both for different reasons. I like
safe answer. Nice. I like it.
Yeah, I like Unity's kind of like it doesn't kind of force you to go down a certain route, and I iterate quicker with Unity. I like Unreal because it comes up with so many excellent tools, and it's a very awesome. I like blueprints. I like working with C++2 blueprints as well. I like that kind of handoff that can be done when you've kind of got the systems, but then you're opening up a load of stuff to designers. That makes it a little bit more fluid. But generally, I have no kind of strong preference. I like them both for different reasons.
So you actually program more in C++. You don't really use the blueprints as much.
For this project, it's a heavy blueprints, but
really,
I started working on some C++ stuff.
Okay.
For Twilight Monk. For other projects, it's always been more C++ base, and then you offload kind of like the designer-esque aspects to blueprints, or the visual, or the VFX kind of hookings and stuff to blueprints. It just depends on the kind of the makeup of your team, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I have no strong feelings either way. I know some people don't like blueprints. Say, it's not proper programming because it's not writing text. Like I don't care. If it allows people to make games, it's all groovy in my eyes. I think it opens up. But like all languages, like if you don't know what you're doing, you can make mistakes that might be like performance heavy and whatnot. But that's pretty much any language anyway. So I suppose there's that issue maybe, but yeah, it just depends on the makeup of your team really.
Yeah, we're a very results driven team.
It depends how you're driven, and I always think it's like, well, if you're making what brings you joy, then who cares, if you can afford it.
That's the thing. If you can afford it, and that's exactly hitting the nail on the head, because most of us are down here just trying to make ship a game within 2 years with the little budget and time that we have, and try to make it exceptional. And certainly, like we make things a little hard for ourselves because we got to go in and clean things up later. But at the same time, again, what is more important? I would rather people enjoy the game than to look at it and go, oh, well, it's very technically sound and it runs very efficiently. And, I mean, obviously running stable is important and running efficiently is important, but it's more important that the game is just fun to play to the majority of people who are
playing. Ship as well,
Yeah.
As well. You get to that point in ship. Obviously, if you've got like lots of money, then you can spend a longer time in pre-prod doing things right, setting up a bunch of stuff that's, going to help you, be efficient as possible, where possible. And there's certain, approaches you can take to, help the project kind of stay cleaner. Mm-hmm. It just depends how much money you've got to kind of spend doing those types of things. But, scrappy indies don't have, we have to be very mindful of the money and how it's being spent. Yeah. And sometimes certain luxuries aren't afforded. And you just got to make do. You got to make the best with what you got.
That's right.
I think as long as you've got everybody on your team that's kind of aware of that and good at that, and they can kind of make, the calls that provide the most bang for the buck, I think that's a bonus.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about, because again, many of my listeners are artists, more in line with the creative side, and so they might be very curious of how you and I work together, like how you might get a task from me, and then based on something that Anthony and I decided on and design, and then could you walk us just a little bit through like how we coordinate so that visually it gets what I wanted, but in the end it'll function and work within the confines of the system that you've built up to that point?
Yeah, sure. So initially when I started, it was very there wasn't like huge systems that I was writing, and then I moved on to one. So I'll talk about some of maybe the bigger systems where there'd be generally like either yourself or Ant would have an idea, we'd discuss it in a meeting, and then Ant or yourself would create a design document that kind of highlight the kind of visual. It was very visually driven because you're both artists, obviously. And then I would go through that design, break it down, ask questions that would then poke up any issues. Maybe you didn't think of this, or I need an answer for this that hadn't been thought about. And then we'd go ahead and develop it as best we could, as best I could. But obviously, I'd always let you know the estimated time scale for things, because ultimately it'd have to be in a certain amount of time. But generally, that was been the nicest way to work.
But there's been a couple of times where sometimes I'll provide like a concept of this is the final look that I want it to look like, and I can break apart the pieces, and sometimes I can get you those pieces. But sometimes I'm bogged down with other stuff, and so I'll ask you to kind of do temporary pieces. Like a good example would be the map system, the Atlas system, right?
Yeah.
You were able to, you put in some like kind of really quick doodles of clouds, and I was able to, you use that as placeholders. So the placeholder is just a texture in the engine, and then you make it function the way that you want it, or that we had set up and talked about and agreed to make it function. And then you get all the programming, like 80%, 90% of the programming in to get to the point where it's working. And then I get a chance to kind of come in and art it up for the final pass on things.
Yeah.
And then from there, then we might even decide, oh, well, maybe it needs this other icon, or maybe it needs a fade here, or maybe, that sort of like high level polish of a thing. Then kind of, so there is that constant going back and forth. And to be clear with the audience, we really only meet once a week, really.
that's one of the good things though. Is like we have a good meeting,
Yeah.
and then we're kind of left. Obviously, we communicate in between that if we need to, but we don't have any needless meetings.
Right. I would say we really streamlined our minimalistic distractions throughout the development.
Yes.
I like to think that that's how we were able to get to where we did. But it also helps that you had Anthony. He's just a quick phone call for you. He's right, in the same time zone. So if anything is confusing or like I don't know what Trent wants here or whatever, you can still talk to him, and he has my absolute trust, as do you. That's something else that I hope that you felt throughout all of development, that I just trust you. Like my decision was to hire you, and that for the most part, as long as you're working within the rails that we've set up, the confines of the design of the intention of the whole game, it's not going to be the wrong choice. Whatever you choose is going to be what we want.
Yeah, and communication wise as well, it was kind of like, even if the idea or something I was implementing was slightly skew with to what you wanted originally, that would be communicated and agreed upon anyway, and the reasons for the change or for the slight different direction would be communicated. So again, it comes back to communication. But again, I'd just be able to ask Ant anyway, and he'd be comfortable enough to make the call, because as the designer as well. So it worked very well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Better than most any other game dev experience I've had.
I just want to say, to go back to the clouds, I did put smiley faces on them in my placeholder art.
They were beautiful, and we kept that for a little while.
One of my favorite things to do is put placeholder art in, because I try and make it ridiculous, and it's almost like, because firstly I find it funny anyway, and also it'll annoy the artist to change it sooner.
yeah, we do have some silly stuff in there, and it does. We had a lot of fun developing this game. There's a lot of Easter eggs and a lot of funny little stuff that'll make you chuckle if you look for it. Okay. I wanted to ask you, so you're very focused on, you kind of always have this, you're always bogged down with the task list. Either right now it's mostly bugs, I know, but how much of the game have you gotten to really experience as a player?
So as a player, I've played through probably about 3/4 of the game on Switch, but I'm always kind of testing it. So I'm looking forward to playing it on. I've got a Steam Deck now. I've treated myself to one a few months ago.
Oh, nice!
And it looks really nice on the Steam Deck.
Oh, it does.
And
yes.
So I'm really looking forward to playing it fully, because I don't, even though it's a strange thing. I work on the game, many hours, but I still don't know everything where Ant's put all the hidden various things you can collect. I don't know what I can spoil or not, so I'll just say collect.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that side. I don't know if it's bad or not that I've not played the game fully through yet. I just know that I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to not knowing where everything is. I mean, I've played every level through, if that makes sense, because I've obviously had to test things and work through it. But from an A to B end, I've not had the pleasure yet of being able to do that. But I'm also glad that I've not, because I'll basically... obviously, I don't know if we were allowed to say the release date, but on the release date, I will be installing it and playing it on my Steam Deck.
Yeah, no, I think you're in for a bit of a treat. And it'll be really, I think, interesting for you to see how all the parts that you've built, because you're so focused. To be clear to the audience, it's like, Nate's really just focused on one task at a time, really what's right in front of him, because if he stops to play through other parts of the game, it can slow down development, And I've certainly felt that even as a concept artist, working on games that I worked on in the past, it was like, well, I don't even know which final concepts got into some of the Warcraft expansions I worked on, because, I was so focused on the next zone that was 6 months out, and I didn't have time to sit and just play the game. But it's funny because many people, when they found that out, they're like, well, how do you not know? If you worked on the game, you should know what's in there. It's like, well, no, I wasn't the visionary freaking director of the thing. I don't know every final decision of what finally came into the game. I just know the part that I was responsible for the most. And the bigger the team, the more compartmentalized that gets. But then when it's a really small team, you can't let yourself get too distracted. And it wouldn't necessarily benefit you to, be playing through level 1 when we're only 6 months into development as much,
Yeah.
other than just if you really like that genre of game and it's something where you're like, well, I have a lot of feedback on the gameplay, or if we're asking for it. And I'd like to think that this team is one that we do welcome everybody's perspective and input on the development team. I really do feel like we made a baby together, so to speak.
I remember a time when no one's feedback was ignored, in all honesty. I've always felt that if anyone's ever needed feedback, it's always been well received and thought about. Yeah. To be fair, like even the Next Fest feedback was really good, but we had quite a lot of feedback prior to that was really receptive, and we did our best to kind of, obviously, we can't implement everything, and sometimes people suggest things that sound good on paper, but actually wouldn't work, and we've already discussed the reasons why that wouldn't work because we've already tried that out. Yeah. But yeah, for the most part, we've always tried to be very open to feedback, which is nice.
Everybody on the team is an indie game developer, though. Everybody on the team was at one point either a solo game developer or worked on very a two-person team. So it's not like when you sometimes you'll get feedback or you'll get somebody's opinion that they've never made a game before, but they're like, oh, I think you should have the rocket launcher from like level 1. Not that this game has a rocket launcher, just as a generic example of the kind of feedback sometimes you get as a game developer. They'll think that they want that thing. Oh, I want infinite ammo. I hate that I run out of ammo. And it's like, well, the game loses its tension if you take away that ammo. And if you're a game developer, you know that. If you've made games where you are trying to create tension, you make resources limited, for example. As a developer, we have to listen to that and go, oh, it's working then. Our feeling that we want to give the player is working. They're feeling the tension, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And to be fair, like, they are heard, and often they are even if nothing comes from it, often there's still been a good discussion behind the scenes that they'll just never know about, which is still, if you could kind of impart that onto many players that might feel ignored, it's like, actually, no, yeah, we did discuss it, and positively, but they obviously will never know that. So that's a shame. But
I was surprised. I did some director commentary for just the dojo path. That's just like the first tutorial area of the game. And I was really surprised that the response was so incredibly positive. I think that the reason, and this is purely my theory, I think that the reason there was such a positive response is that people just want to know that you really put a lot of thought into the design, that it wasn't flippant. When a player just picks up a controller, they don't have a director, they don't have the context of knowing that the director or the development team like fought over these decisions. And
it'd be awesome in the future if there's some kind of like VR thing that, or maybe some kind of like virtual reality thing where you can be the director whispering in their ear, going, "Oh, you're gonna love this bit," type thing.
Well, I would love to do a director commentary for the whole game, but it would be literally 100 hours because it's probably a 15 to 20 hour game if you're an average player. And, just the first dojo path is only 10 minutes of gameplay, but I spent an hour doing commentary for it. Yeah, but I think that, I think it's just that players need to know that we need to do what we can to communicate that we have given a lot of thought to all of these different considerations, everything down to the player movement speed, to the animation frame speed, to and I go through meticulously looking at every damn pixel to make sure that there's nothing out of place, and I still find things that I couldn't address. There's a million and one things that could go wrong at any specific camera angle that you didn't know happens, or when in this weird condition that if you go into this room with this one item and you hit this one enemy with this one thing and you have this other ability engaged, then this weird thing happens, and it's like, well, we can't know every possible reality.
One of the best bugs that was raised. Am I allowed to talk about the bugs?
Yeah, let's talk about bugs.
Was if you're in the one of the shops rooms, because they're a tiny shop. If you threw a certain, I think it was the bomb. Oh, I'm not allowed to talk about the abilities. If you threw a certain thing and it shook the camera, you'd be able to see text that was left in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like there was some text like this should do this, like to help the designers or whatever. And you could only see it if you did some ability within this one area because the camera kind of clipped it, and no one had seen that. It was funny. I just found it funny that that you could do stuff like that.
Well, our game testers are beasts. They try the weirdest stuff, and it's very fascinating to watch because their whole job is just to like try to break the game the same way 500 times. And and it's so interesting the things they come up with that we had no idea how to, like, we would not have anticipated that people could leave this ability. It's like an attack that you can leave behind and it does damage after you leave. But then if you leave the room, that could still detonate. And so there were glitches or bugs that we were getting where, the player leaves this weapon in the previous room and they leave and then it blows up and then it triggers this event, which then catches up to you in a different room, causing disruptions to gameplay where we didn't expect it to happen. That's just so fun. And so I always find it very entertaining when people say, oh, well, those Bethesda games, why are they shipping so buggy? And it's like, man, you don't know how hard it is to keep track of all these 1,000,001 possibilities. And I'm grateful that we have as much player agency. The more player agency we give to the player, the more chances there are of these kind of things happening.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. But very gratefully, we've got I'm very grateful that we have a very stable game at launch. I think it'll be tough for people to break this one, I think.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah.
But I hope so.
So you have a love for retro games as well, right?
Yeah.
Do you have do you have a defining game that made you go like, oh, I gotta make video games now that I've played this? Like, this game makes me want to make video games. Do you have anything like that?
Sega Mega Drive Splatterhouse 2.
Without hesitation, you're like, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the game.
Yeah.
It's either that or Monkey Island, for different reasons. I was slightly a bit older when I played Monkey Island. But Splatterhouse 2, because I think I must have been 9 or something when that came out. And I got it on for the Sega Mega Drive. I was like, this is freaking cool. I get to splatter people. I want to make... And I think I broke that game apart in my head. Wrote loads of plans of how I'd bring it together and stuff. Because it wasn't that complex of a game, as a platformer. So I could kind of dissect it in my brain. And that was kind of exciting for tiny Nathan. And I always was like, oh yeah, I want to make games now. And I also want to make a game for the Sega Mega Drive. And then the second one was Monkey Island. And Monkey Island, obviously, great story, and I love the kind of puzzles. But also, when I was a little kid, I was doing an English coursework, write a story. So I thought, write about Monkey Island, because probably plagiarism, but it was basically fan fiction, really. Mm-hmm. But I thought no one will know, because I didn't think that adults played these games. And then the teachers pulled me up on it. They said, great story, Nathan, but you can't remember plagiarism. You can't copy other people's work.
They knew.
Yeah, but it was kind of an eye-opening moment for me because I realized that everyone plays computer games at that point.
Yeah.
And one of them I always liked. So I started it was almost like a relationship building thing where I kind of could talk to an adult about something I enjoyed because I wasn't into sports or anything like that. To another adult that was playing through the game, and one of the best things was I beat the game before them. So it was like, oh, that's cool.
What Monkey Island had was vibes, though, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
The music, from the style,
the writing,
the art style, the characters' writing was so fun and so clever, and it was the first time that I'd ever seen a game where you're fighting enemies, but you're not using traditional combat.
To fix that puzzle, to go through that puzzle, they'd give you an insult, and you'd have to choose the right insult, and then you kind of parry them and push them forward. So that was kind of the joke.
Yeah.
I didn't even have. I didn't even own the game. It was my friend who had I think it was an Atari ST or a very, MS DOS PC. And I used to just go around their house and play it.
Yeah.
Oh, Nathan's here to play Monkey Island.
I would imagine that would actually be a fun game to play with a buddy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was because you got stuck so much. Games took you, obviously because there was no internet and whatnot. So you get stuck on a puzzle. You have to go in and think about it. Mm-hmm. For ages, unless you had enough money, I guess, to ring up the hint lines, but they were always in America, so you never did. Yeah.
And those kind of games were about trying all kinds of stuff. Like Maniac Mansion, there was a big controversy because you could put the hamster in the microwave.
Yeah.
That was a big controversy. That was like, all these video games are so violent now because you could put a little 16 by 16 hamster pixels, a super pixelated hamster in a pixelated microwave and push a button. And I think it would explode. I don't remember. But I just remember it was super controversial. And I was like, whoa, that's hardcore. I got to play this Maniac Mansion game. And then the same developers, I believe many of the same developers made Monkey Island soon after.
Yeah. LucasArts.
Did you play the newest one?
I've played half of it, and then I think my computer crashed and I lost the save. So I've not gone back to it.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Man.
But it's really good.
Yeah, I just got it on. It's on PlayStation Plus this month. It's one of the freebies that they give you. Yeah. What's this newest one called?
I've completely forgotten. Which is bad of me.
I do kind of prefer the old art style. Return to Monkey Island. That's what it is.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, like, obviously, it was pixelated back then because of limitations, but there's something about like retro pixel art that just makes me happy.
I kind of, you know what, they would do really awesome if they just did like a I know it's a tall order, but to do a pixelated version of the same game.
Pretty sure, I might be wrong here, I might be dreaming it, but I'm pretty sure you could go to different versions of the game where one was old school or not. I might actually be thinking of the remakes of the original two, where you could go from old school to new school. I can't remember.
But there are like 4 or 5 of these games. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, there's so many of them. I didn't even realize. Secret of Monkey Island, Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge, The Curse of Monkey Island, Escape from Monkey Island, Launch of the Screaming... I'm just Googling this. Launch of the Screaming Narwhal. Never even heard of that one.
You've never heard of that either.
And then Tales of Monkey Island, which was it looks like a 3D, like, is this the PS2 one? I think that's the PS2 one. Yeah. And PC. It was on PC also. And then Return to Monkey Island in 2022. Anyway, great series. Definitely like influenced me as well. That and the original Sam and Max games were really fun
Max,
too.
Yes.
Yeah, love the LucasArts. Very just jokey, fun, good times, but it was immersive and artsy. And I always would love to have done like adventure games like this. Really fun to develop too, but it's a very niche audience for sure.
One of my main hobby projects is a horror game that I'm writing for the Sega Mega Drive. That's a point and click horror, and I think that's as niche as you can get.
Yeah, it is pretty niche. Did you know that Twilight Monk at one point was a point and click adventure?
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I have like someday I'll put out a 20-minute video of it. Yeah, and it was, in fact, I ended up writing the whole story as a novel. It's The Secrets of Kung Fu Leo was originally a point-and-click adventure, and I have a good chunk of it built. It was all built in Unity Engine because there's a plugin that somebody made called the Adventure Creators Toolkit.
Yeah, it's meant to be good.
It's actually really freaking good because it just removes all of the, like, it's so modular based. So like if you want to have your character move to this point, then you create all the animations and then you just tell them to like, or you have like when the player clicks, it just goes to that point, and then you can have, if you interact, like you can set up you can interact in these 5 or 10 different ways. You can use items on things by dragging and dropping. It was basically everything that you would need to make a point and click adventure game like the old LucasArts games if you have no programming skill at all.
Nice. That sounds really cool.
It's really cool. If you're an artist, it's incredible. And I was like, I just want to tell stories and do all these animations and bring these characters to life. And so that's why I started writing out that story and adding all those sequences. But I got to a point where I was like, Twilight Monk is a kung fu universe. It's a kung fu action adventure universe. It lends itself to a kung fu action adventure RPG. Like it lends itself, the concept of what Twilight Monk is lends itself better to a RPG Metroidvania than it does an adventure point and click adventure game. It's just.
But you won't want to do quick time events.
Yeah, you can actually. I played like the Walking Dead, and I thought those quick time events were really like. It's an interesting way to create tension and action, but That was beyond the scope of what that engine could do anyway. So yeah.
Oh.
But anyway, when am I going to get a chance to play your horror game?
Oh gosh, hopefully next year. I'm working on a prototype at the moment. I'm just trying to. I literally the other day started writing my own kind of first art test thing to try and find another pixel artist. I'm working with a pixel artist who's great at the moment, but I just need another one for some environment stuff. So that was fun. I'm learning a lot of how to kind of approach different fields for hiring, which is a weird. Not hiring, but working with freelancers. I don't have enough money for actual hiring, but like £100 here and there is what I can.
After Twilight Monk comes out, we'll see.
One of the interesting things about being a creative and working in the game industry is you kind of got to learn how to put that urge to work on other stuff at the side while you're focusing on finishing the things, because it's such an intense pull. That it is a skill in itself, just learning to say, I'll do it later. Or it doesn't mean that you can't chip away at stuff or get excited in the back of your mind. But it does mean that you kind of have to learn to focus on the thing in front of you.
And we do still have plenty to do on Twilight Monk. We plan to address a lot of player feedback immediately after release. And so we're going to continue to do updates after release. And you're going to be on board for all that. So I think we've been talking for about an hour. I think it's a good idea to kind of close this one out. Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss real quick, or anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, it's been easy chatting. It's good.
Well, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time out of your schedule for just talking, just shooting the breeze, as they say. It's very interesting to find out a little bit more about you. We're so professional. I wear a suit every time I'm in a Discord meeting, by the way. I don't know if you know that. I have a white wig that I put on, and I hold a
cane.
No, but thank you so much for taking the time to chat, and thanks everyone for tuning in. And please, if you have any questions or comments, things you'd like to know about in future podcast episodes, please drop those in the comments or message me over on Twitter. Of course, don't forget to check out Twilight Monk over on Steam. It's coming to Steam, PC, and Nintendo Switch, and that will be available on March 27th of 2025. Oh, I can't wait till this game is out.
Yes.
So far, really great response from players who've gotten a chance to play the demo at Next Fest, and everybody will be able to play the whole thing pretty soon. So thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you in the next one. Right, chat.
Take care.